With no backup plan, a widowed father entered a condemned estate containing $265 million. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 in the morning, its shrill cry cutting through the darkness of the cramped two-bedroom apartment like a knife. Marcus Wade reached out with a calloused hand and silenced it before the sound could wake his kids. He lay there for a moment in the pre-dawn silence, staring at the water-stained ceiling, counting the cracks he'd memorized over the past 2 years. 37. Always 37. Some mornings he thought about fixing them. Most mornings he remembered he couldn't afford the plaster. He rolled out of bed, his back protesting with a sharp pain that had become his constant companion since he turned 36. The floor was cold beneath his bare feet. March in northern Colorado came with a bite that refused to let go, even indoors. The apartment's heating barely worked, and the landlord had stopped returning his calls about it 3 months ago. Marcus pulled on his worn jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, the elbows patched with fabric that didn't quite match. In the bathroom mirror, a stranger stared back at him. He looked 50, not 38. His dark hair was flecked with premature gray, his eyes carrying shadows that no amount of sleep could erase. 2 years. It had been 2 years since Sarah died, and some days it felt like yesterday. Other days it felt like a lifetime. He splashed cold water on his face and moved quietly through the apartment, avoiding the floorboard that creaked near Emma's door. His daughter was 12 now, growing up too fast, forced to be the woman of the house when she should have been worried about school dances and homework. His son Tyler, 8 years old, still asked when Mummy was coming home sometimes, especially late at night when the grief hit hardest. Those were the moments that broke Marcus in ways he couldn't explain. The kitchen was barely big enough to turn around in. Marcus made coffee in the ancient Mr. Coffee machine Sarah had bought at a yard sale 6 years ago. It sputtered and groaned but still worked, unlike most things in his life. While it brewed, he made lunches for the kids. Peanut butter and jelly again. The bread was a day past the sell-by date, but it was fine. He'd checked. He added a bruised apple to each lunchbox and a handful of pretzels he'd bought in bulk. There was a $10 bill tucked in the front pocket of his wallet, enough for his own lunch if he skipped breakfast. He'd done it before. By 6:15, he was out the door, climbing into his 2003 Ford Ranger. The truck had 218,000 miles on it, a cracked windshield, and a radio that only worked when it felt like it. But the engine was solid, because Marcus knew how to keep things running even when they were dying. He'd learned that skill out of necessity. When you couldn't afford to replace things, you learned to fix them. The job site was 40 minutes away, a new housing development where Marcus worked as a general contractor and handyman. He did whatever they needed, framing, drywall, plumbing, electrical. He'd taught himself most of it through YouTube videos and trial and error. The pay was decent when the work was steady, but winter had been slow. His bank account showed $1,237. Rent was $950 due in 8 days. That left him with $287 for food, gas, utilities, and whatever else came up. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. The sun rose slowly over the mountains as he drove, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sarah would have loved this sunrise. She used to wake him up early just to watch them together, back when life was simpler, back when medical bills weren't piled on the kitchen counter like accusations, back when the word cancer wasn't tattooed on his heart. The medical debt had crushed them. Even with insurance, the treatments had cost more than they could imagine. $73,000. That's what they still owed when she died. The hospital had been kind at first, offering payment plans and extensions. But kindness had limits, and those limits came with interest rates and collection agencies. Marcus had sold almost everything: Sarah's car, the furniture they'd saved up for, her jewelry except for the wedding ring he kept in his pocket. He'd taken every overtime shift, every weekend job, every favor he could find, and still, the debt hung over him like a storm cloud that never broke. By 7:30, Marcus was swinging a hammer, trying to lose himself in the rhythm of work. His crew was good people. Tom, a retired Army vet with a bad knee and worse jokes. Carlos, who sent half his paycheck back to family in Mexico. And Jenny, a single mom who worked harder than anyone Marcus had ever met. They didn't talk much about their lives. They didn't have to. They all understood struggle. It was written in their hands, in the way they stretched their paychecks, in the quiet determination that got them through each day. During lunch break, Marcus sat alone in his truck, eating a gas station burrito he'd bought for $2.19. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through emails, deleting spam and ignoring the ones from debt collectors. Then he saw it. An email from the county assessor's office. Subject line, upcoming property auction. He almost deleted it. He'd signed up for these notifications months ago when he thought maybe, somehow, he could find a fixer-upper to flip. That dream had died quickly when he realized he didn't have money for tools, let alone property. But something made him open it. The email listed 14 properties going to auction next week. Most were vacant lots or foreclosed homes with back taxes owed. Marcus scrolled through without much interest until he reached listing number 9. Shadowbrook Estate, 7 acres, condemned structure, former residence of Vincent Holloway, minimum bid, $5,000. Marcus sat up straighter. Shadowbrook Estate. He knew that name. Everyone in Pierce County knew it. The massive stone mansion had sat empty on the edge of town for 31 years, slowly rotting behind rusted gates and no trespassing signs. Local kids said it was haunted. Adults said it was a death trap. The county had been trying to sell it for years, but nobody wanted the liability. The structure was condemned, the foundation was failing, and the cost to demolish it would run into 6 figures, but $5,000. Marcus clicked through to the property details. The photos showed a sprawling estate that might have been beautiful once. 3 stories of stone and timber, tall windows, a circular driveway choked with weeds. But the roof sagged in places, windows were broken, and ivy had claimed entire walls. The listing warned of structural instability, potential asbestos, lead paint, mold, and unsafe conditions. It recommended demolition. He clicked on the property history. Vincent Holloway had purchased the estate in 1976 for $112,000. He'd been a wealthy businessman, made his fortune in manufacturing and imports. But in 1993, he'd vanished. Just disappeared one day. No body, no note, no explanation. The estate had been tied up in legal battles for years as distant relatives fought over inheritance. Eventually, the county seized it for unpaid taxes. That was 8 years ago. Since then, it had sat empty, waiting. Something sparked in Marcus's chest. It wasn't quite hope, more like curiosity mixed with desperation. 7 acres. Even if the house was worthless, the land had to be worth something. Maybe he could buy it cheap, bulldoze the mansion, subdivide the lots, and sell them. It was a long shot, maybe an impossible shot, but it was something. He spent the rest of his lunch break researching. The auction was in 6 days. Saturday morning at the county courthouse. Bidders had to register in advance and show proof of funds. Minimum bid was $5,000, but Marcus doubted there would be much competition. Who wanted a condemned mansion and 7 acres of liability? That night, after Emma and Tyler were asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a calculator. He had $1,237 in checking. He had $815 in savings, money he'd been setting aside for emergencies. That gave him $2,052. Not enough. His credit cards were maxed out, his credit score destroyed by medical debt. The bank wouldn't loan him money to buy groceries, let alone property, but he had tools. Expensive tools he'd bought back when work was steadier. A full set of Milwaukee power tools, a table saw, an air compressor, a welding kit. He'd priced them out once for insurance purposes. Total value, around $3,800. He could sell them. The thought made him sick. Those tools were how he made his living. Without them, he'd be reduced to day labor, jobs that paid minimum wage and offered no future. But what if this worked? What if he could flip this property? Marcus pulled up the property listing again and studied every detail. The estate sat on a hill overlooking the valley. The location was actually prime real estate. New developments were creeping closer every year. If he could just get through the demolition, subdivide the land into 3 or 4 lots, he could potentially sell them for $50,000 each. Maybe more. That would clear his debts, set up college funds for the kids, give them the life Sarah had wanted them to have. Or he could lose everything trying. He looked around the cramped apartment. The water-stained ceiling, the crack in the window he'd covered with duct tape, the pile of past-due notices he kept in a drawer so the kids wouldn't see them. What did he really have to lose? By midnight, Marcus had made his decision. He spent the next 3 days selling everything he could. The tools went first, listed on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. A contractor from 2 towns over bought the whole lot for $3,200 cash. Marcus handed them over and felt like he was cutting off his own hands. He sold Sarah's old sewing machine, a vintage Singer she'd inherited from her grandmother. $225. He sold his own laptop, the TV, a guitar he'd bought in college and barely played. Every dollar went into an envelope marked auction. By Friday night, he had $8,915, more than enough for the minimum bid, probably more than he'd need. Emma noticed the empty spaces in the apartment. "Dad, where's the TV?" she asked, her dark eyes too knowing for 12. "Needed to fix the truck," Marcus lied. He'd gotten good at lying to his kids, small lies that protected them from the weight he carried. Saturday morning arrived cold and grey. Marcus dropped Emma and Tyler at his sister's house in Denver. Rachel knew something was up but didn't push. She just hugged him tight and whispered, "Be careful, Marcus, please." The county courthouse sat in the center of Pierce Junction, a small mountain town that had seen better days. Marcus arrived 30 minutes early, the envelope of cash heavy in his jacket pocket. Inside, the auction room was smaller than he'd expected. Folding chairs faced a podium where a clerk in a blazer shuffled papers. Maybe 20 people had shown up, most of them looking like professional investors in button-down shirts and polished shoes. Marcus felt out of place in his work boots and flannel. He registered, showing his ID and signing forms that acknowledged the properties were being sold as is. The clerk barely looked at him. The auction started at 10. Properties sold quickly. Vacant lots went for a few thousand each. A foreclosed duplex went for $47,000 to a woman in the front row who didn't even blink at the price. Marcus's palms sweated. His heart hammered against his ribs. Then the clerk called out, "Listing number 9, Shadowbrook Estate, 7.3 acres, condemned structure, all mineral and water rights included. Minimum bid, $5,000. Silence filled the room. The clerk waited. "Do I have 5,000? Marcus raised his hand before he could talk himself out of it. 5,000. The clerk nodded. 5,000. Do I have 6? Nothing. People shifted in their seats, but no hands went up. Going once at $5,000. The clerk's voice echoed in the quiet room. Marcus held his breath. Going twice. This was insane. He was about to buy a condemned mansion with money he couldn't afford to lose. Sold. To bidder number 18 for $5,000. Just like that, it was done. Marcus weighed, widowed father of two, barely scraping by, now owned Shadowbrook Estate. He filled out the paperwork in a daze, counted out $5,000 in cash, while the clerk watched with raised eyebrows. She handed him a receipt and a set of keys that looked like they belonged in a horror movie. Heavy brass, tarnished with age. "You know that place is condemned, right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Structural engineers say the whole thing could collapse. Insurance won't touch it." "I understand." She studied him for a long moment. "What are you planning to do with it?" Marcus tucked the keys into his pocket. "Honestly, I have no idea." He drove out to the property alone, following directions on his phone. The estate sat at the end of a long private road that hadn't been maintained in decades. Potholes big enough to swallow his truck made the final mile treacherous. Then the trees opened up, and there it was. Shadowbrook Estate rose from the hilltop like something out of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of dark stone and weathered timber. Tall windows, most broken or boarded up. A wide porch that sagged dangerously. Ivy and vines had consumed entire sections of the walls. The circular driveway was cracked and overgrown, but even in decay, there was something magnificent about it. Something that spoke of wealth and ambition and dreams that had died hard. Marcus parked and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. What had he done? This wasn't a fixer-upper. This was a disaster. The property looked worse in person than in the photos. Danger seemed to radiate from every broken window and sagging beam, but he'd bought it. It was his now. He got out of the truck and approached the front entrance. The porch steps groaned under his weight. He tested each one carefully. The front door was massive, solid oak, swollen from years of weather. Marcus tried the brass key. It turned smoothly, too smoothly for a lock that hadn't been opened in 3 decades. The door swung inward with a sound like a dying breath. The smell hit him first. Mold, dust, decay, but underneath, something else. Old wood, stone. The ghost of what this place had been. Marcus stepped inside and his boots echoed on marble floors covered in debris. The entry hall was enormous, with a grand staircase that curved up to the 2nd floor. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, half its pieces missing. To his left, a formal dining room. To his right, what looked like a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. He moved carefully through the 1st floor, testing each step. In the kitchen, ancient appliances sat covered in dust. Cabinets hung open, their contents long ago claimed by rodents. The back of the house opened onto what had been a terrace, now cracked and dangerous. But the view took his breath away. The entire valley spread out below, mountains in the distance, the sunset already painting everything gold. Sarah would have loved this view. Marcus explored for another hour as the light faded. He found 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a study, a conservatory with a collapsed roof. Everywhere he looked, he saw money he didn't have. The renovation costs would be astronomical. Hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. In the library, one section of shelving sat at an odd angle, like it had shifted away from the wall. Marcus approached and ran his hand along the wood. It was solid, heavy. He pulled gently and felt resistance. Then he noticed the hinges hidden in the ornate carving. This wasn't a bookshelf. It was a door. His heart began to pound. He pulled harder and the entire section swung outward, revealing a dark opening behind it. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. Stone steps led down into darkness. Every instinct told him to leave. He didn't have proper equipment, didn't have backup, didn't even have a first aid kit. But curiosity pulled him forward. He descended carefully, phone light sweeping the darkness. The stairs were steep, narrow, carved from stone. They went down much farther than he expected. 20 steps. 30. 40. Then they ended in a hallway. The walls were smooth concrete. The air was cool, dry, nothing like the musty decay upstairs. Marcus moved forward, and his light caught something that made him stop dead. A door, heavy steel with a sophisticated lock, and it was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and stepped into a room that shouldn't exist. The space was huge, climate-controlled, pristine. Track lighting automatically flickered on, startling him. And everywhere he looked, cars. Vintage automobiles parked in perfect rows. A 1963 Corvette Stingray, a 1957 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, a 1969 Shelby Cobra. At least 20 vehicles, each one gleaming like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Marcus walked between them in a daze. His hands trembled. He knew cars. He'd rebuilt engines since he was 16. And these were museum pieces, each one worth hundreds of thousands, some worth millions. But it wasn't just cars. Along the walls, glass cases displayed collections, vintage watches, jewelry, art. Shelves held carefully organized boxes. Everything was labeled, catalogued, preserved. In the center of the room sat a large desk. Marcus approached it slowly. On the desk, a leather journal, a laptop computer somehow still powered, and a letter in a sealed envelope. The envelope had one word written on it in elegant script: Finder. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. The paper inside was thick, expensive. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have inherited more than property. My name is Vincent Holloway. I built a fortune through hard work, and some would say ruthless ambition. But I built something else too: enemies. Powerful people who wanted what I had, who tried to destroy me when I wouldn't bend to their will. In 1993, I learned they planned to kill me and claim everything I'd worked for. So I disappeared. I left behind this collection, everything I truly valued, hidden where they would never find it. The estate above is a decoy, meant to rot and discourage interest. But this vault, this is my true legacy. If you found it, you were meant to. The property is yours legally. So is everything in this room. I've ensured that through legal documents stored in the third filing cabinet. Use it wisely. Build something good. Vincent Holloway. Marcus read the letter 3 times. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing, what this meant. He was standing in an underground vault containing what had to be tens of millions of dollars in assets. Maybe more. And it was his. Legally his. He pulled out the filing cabinet and found exactly what Vincent promised. Legal documents, titles, certificates of authenticity, insurance appraisals. Everything organized and notarized. Vincent had planned this down to the last detail. Marcus's legs gave out. He sat hard in the desk chair and stared at the room around him. 24 hours ago, he'd been a broke contractor selling his tools to gamble on a condemned property. Now he was sitting in a vault containing a fortune that could change his life, his kids' lives, his entire future. But as his shock began to fade, reality crept in. This wouldn't be simple. Nothing ever was. Wealthy people didn't just disappear and leave fortunes behind without consequences. Vincent had enemies, powerful ones, and now Marcus owned what they'd been looking for 31 years. He thought about Emma and Tyler, safe at his sister's house. He thought about the cramped apartment, the medical debt, the years of struggle. And he thought about Sarah, who'd fought so hard to live, who'd made him promise to take care of their babies. This could save them, or it could destroy them. Marcus stood slowly, his decision already made. He'd spent 2 years surviving. Maybe it was time to start living. He took photos of everything with his phone, documenting the cars, the collections, the documents. Then he carefully locked the vault, closed the hidden door in the library, and walked back through the crumbling mansion to his truck. The sun had set completely. Stars filled the sky above Shadowbrook Estate. Marcus sat in his truck for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady his breathing. He'd gambled everything on a condemned property with no backup plan. And somehow, impossibly, he'd won. But as he drove down the rutted driveway toward the main road, he didn't see the black sedan parked in the trees. Didn't notice the man inside taking photos. Didn't know that word of the auction had already reached people who'd been waiting 3 decades for someone to finally claim Shadowbrook Estate. Marcus Wade had just become the owner of $265 million in hidden assets, and he had no idea how many people would kill to take them from him. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his phone clutched in his hand, scrolling through the photos he'd taken. The Corvette, the Gullwing, the Shelby. Each image felt like a dream he was afraid to wake from. Beside him on the nightstand sat Vincent Holloway's letter, read so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. By 4 a.m, he gave up on sleep entirely. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, searching for information about Vincent Holloway. What he found painted a picture of a man who'd been larger than life. Born in 1941, Vincent had built his fortune importing rare goods, art, automobiles, collectibles. He'd been featured in business magazines throughout the 1980s as a self-made millionaire with impeccable taste and iron will. But there were other articles too, ones that hinted at darker dealings. Lawsuits from business partners who claimed Vincent had cheated them, whispers of connections to organized crime. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Then, in March of 1993, Vincent Holloway had simply vanished. His office was found locked but empty, his home abandoned mid-breakfast, eggs still on the plate. The police investigated, but without a body or evidence of foul play, the case went cold. Over the years, theories multiplied. He'd fled the country, been killed by the mob, started a new life in witness protection, but no one knew for certain, and now Marcus held the answer. Vincent hadn't fled. He'd gone into hiding, leaving behind a fortune for whoever was brave or desperate enough to claim Shadowbrook Estate. Marcus made a decision as dawn broke through the apartment windows. He needed help, real help, not just to understand what he had, but to protect it. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? He'd bought the property legally. Everything in the vault was documented as belonging to the estate. Technically, it was all his. But something in Vincent's letter, the mention of powerful enemies, made Marcus hesitate. If Vincent had been running from people dangerous enough to make him disappear, those people might still be out there, still watching. Instead, he called the one person he trusted completely. His sister Rachel answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Marcus, it's 6 a.m. Are the kids okay?" "They're fine. They're still asleep. Rachel, I need to talk to you about something big." 30 minutes later, Rachel was sitting at his kitchen table, her coffee untouched, staring at the photos on his phone with an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief. "You're serious," she said. "This isn't some kind of joke." "I wish it were. Marcus, these cars alone, do you have any idea what they're worth?" He nodded slowly. "I've been researching all night. The Gullwing genuine examples sell for over $1 million. The Cobra, maybe $2 million. The Ferrari 250 California in the back, I saw one sell at auction for $18 million. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God. And that's just the cars. There's jewelry, art, vintage watches. I found a box of Rolex Submariners from the 1960s, mint condition. Another box full of Patek Philippe watches. Rachel, there's a Picasso sketch in a frame, a real Picasso." His sister stood and paced the small kitchen, processing. Okay, we need to think clearly. You bought the property legally. You have the deed. The vault was on the property, so technically everything inside belongs to you. But Marcus, this is insane. You're talking about what, 50 million? 100 million? "More," Marcus said quietly. "I spent all night doing rough estimates based on auction records. Conservative estimates. Rachel, I think the collection is worth over $265 million. The number hung in the air between them like something too large to be real. Rachel sat back down heavily. "You need a lawyer," she said, "like yesterday. You need someone who specializes in estate law, maybe tax law, and you need security. If what this Vincent guy said is true, if there really are people who wanted this collection, they're going to come looking." "I know." "Do Emma and Tyler know?" Marcus shook his head. "They know I bought the property. They think it's just land. I haven't told them about the vault." "Good. Keep it that way until you know it's safe." Rachel reached across and gripped his hand. "Marcus, this could be everything you need. College for the kids, pay off the medical bills, a real home. But you have to be smart. You have to be careful." That afternoon, Marcus returned to Shadowbrook Estate, this time prepared. He'd bought proper flashlights, a first aid kit, work gloves, and a respirator mask. He'd also stopped at a sporting goods store and purchased something he'd never owned before, a handgun. A Glock 19, simple and reliable. The clerk had given him a strange look when Marcus asked about ammunition, but he didn't care. If Vincent Holloway's enemies came looking, Marcus wasn't going to be defenseless. The estate looked different in daylight, less gothic horror and more tragic decay. Marcus parked and sat for a moment, studying the property with fresh eyes. 7.3 acres. The main house covered maybe half an acre. That left 7 acres of overgrown gardens, outbuildings, and forest. He'd been so focused on the mansion and vault that he hadn't explored the rest of the grounds. He decided to start there. Behind the main house, he found the remains of a formal garden, stone pathways choked with weeds leading to a dry fountain. Beyond that, a greenhouse with most of its glass panels shattered, and at the far edge of the property, partially hidden by trees, a separate building. A garage, massive, easily big enough for 10 vehicles. The doors were chained shut, but through dirty windows, Marcus could see shapes inside. More cars. His pulse quickened. He used bolt cutters from his truck to break the chain and heaved open the heavy doors. Sunlight flooded into a space that took his breath away. 12 vehicles sat in perfect formation, each covered with a fitted car cover. Marcus moved between them, lifting covers one by one. A 1934 Packard 12, a 1955 Chevy Bel Air, a 1967 Pontiac GTO. More rolling artwork, all perfectly preserved. Against the back wall, metal shelving units held boxes labeled with meticulous detail. Packard original parts, Bel Air restoration documentation, GTO service records. Vincent had been methodical, obsessive even, in preserving not just the vehicles but their complete histories. Marcus spent 2 hours cataloguing everything with his phone, taking photos and notes. When he finally returned to the main house, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. He entered through the front door, made his way to the library, and opened the hidden passage. Descending into the vault felt different this time. The shock had worn off, replaced by a strange sense of responsibility. This wasn't just his ticket out of poverty. It was history, legacy. Vincent Holloway had spent decades building this collection, and now Marcus was its guardian. In the vault, he approached the desk where he'd found the letter. The laptop sitting there was connected to a power strip that ran to a hidden outlet in the wall. The whole vault had power, climate control, everything engineered to preserve the collection indefinitely. Marcus opened the laptop. It booted up immediately, password protected. He tried a few obvious combinations. Nothing worked. Then he remembered the letter and tried Finder in various forms. On the 5th attempt, the screen unlocked. What he found made his knees weak. The desktop contained hundreds of files, all meticulously organized. Folders labeled vehicles, art, jewelry, documentation, provenance, insurance. Marcus opened the vehicles folder and found individual files for each car. Detailed restoration logs, purchase receipts, photographs documenting every stage of acquisition and restoration. The Gullwing had been purchased in 1981 for $47,000 and restored over 3 years at a cost of $89,000. The Cobra had been found in a barn in 1978, bought for $12,000 and restored to perfection. But it was the insurance folder that made Marcus sit down hard in the chair. Vincent had maintained detailed appraisals, updated regularly through 1992. The final document, dated February of 1993, 1 month before Vincent disappeared, listed the total insured value of the collection at $218 million, and that was 31 years ago. Marcus did quick math in his head. Accounting for appreciation, rarity increases, and market changes, the collection could easily be worth double that now, maybe more. He opened the art folder and found appraisals for pieces he hadn't even noticed yet. Paintings stored in climate-controlled cabinets, sculptures wrapped in protective materials, drawings and prints by masters whose names made Marcus's hands shake. He spent 3 hours going through files, his understanding of what he'd inherited growing with each document. Vincent hadn't just collected valuable items. He'd assembled a curated museum of 20th-century automotive and artistic achievement. Every piece had been chosen with care, restored with precision, documented with scholarly thoroughness. This wasn't a rich man's toy collection. It was a life's work. In a folder labeled Personal, Marcus found something that made his throat tight. Journal entries, written sporadically over decades. He read them in chronological order, watching Vincent Holloway transform from ambitious young businessman to paranoid recluse. The early entries were optimistic, excited about new acquisitions and restoration projects. But by the late 1980s, the tone shifted. "They're pressuring me to sell the European pieces. I've refused. This collection isn't for sale. It's my legacy." 1987. Another threatening letter. "They think they can intimidate me into partnership. They don't understand this isn't about money anymore." 1989. "I've taken precautions. The vault is complete. If something happens to me, at least the collection will survive. Let them fight over the empty shell of Shadowbrook. The real treasure will be safe." 1991. The final entry was dated March 3, 1993. "I've learned they plan to move against me. Multiple sources confirm it. Powerful people don't forgive being told no. I'm leaving tonight. The collection stays. Someday, someone will find it. Someone who needs it more than I do now. Someone who'll appreciate what I built, not just what it's worth. To that person, I leave everything. May you have better luck with it than I did. V.H." Marcus closed the laptop and sat in the quiet vault, surrounded by the ghosts of Vincent's dreams. He understood now. Vincent hadn't just been hiding from criminals. He'd been protecting art, history, beauty from people who only saw dollar signs. And now that responsibility had fallen to Marcus. He was about to leave when he noticed something he'd missed before. A filing cabinet in the corner, separate from the others. He opened the top drawer and found legal documents. Deeds, titles, certificates. Everything proving ownership of every item in the collection. But the bottom drawer held something different. A leather portfolio, the kind lawyers used. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to various law firms, government agencies, insurance companies, all dated within weeks of Vincent's disappearance. Marcus read through them carefully. Vincent had been thorough. He'd legally transferred everything to a trust, with instructions that if he didn't check in annually, the trust would dissolve, and all assets would transfer to whoever legally owned Shadowbrook Estate. He'd paid taxes on the collection through shell corporations for years, ensuring everything remained legitimate. He'd even filed documentation with the county recorder's office, buried in obscure property records, detailing the existence of the vault and its contents. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. Vincent had spent years ensuring that when someone finally claimed Shadowbrook, they would have ironclad ownership of the collection. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for a man he'd never met. Vincent could have destroyed everything or lost it to legal battles. Instead, he'd built a pathway for someone else's salvation. Marcus was so absorbed in the documents that he didn't hear the footsteps upstairs until they were directly above him. His blood ran cold. Someone was in the house. He quickly closed the filing cabinet, shut down the laptop, and moved to the vault door. Through the narrow opening, he could hear voices. At least 2 people, maybe more. "I'm telling you, someone's been here. Fresh tire tracks in the driveway. Check the whole house. If the vault's been found, we need to know." Marcus's heart hammered. He quietly pulled the vault door closed and locked it from inside. The steel was thick, soundproof. He was safe for now, but trapped. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The vault was too deep, too well shielded. He couldn't call for help. Above him, the footsteps continued. He heard furniture being moved, doors opening and closing. They were searching systematically. Eventually, they'd find the library, the hidden door. And then what? Marcus checked his pistol, made sure a round was chambered. He'd never shot anyone in his life, never even pointed a gun at another human being. But if they tried to take his kid's future, he'd do what he had to. Minutes crawled past. The footsteps moved through the 2nd floor, then the 3rd. Marcus waited in the silent vault, surrounded by millions of dollars in automotive art, and prayed they wouldn't find the entrance. He thought about Emma and Tyler, about Sarah, about how close he'd come to changing everything. Then the footsteps stopped, voices muffled but audible. "It's not here. If there's a vault, we're not finding it today." The old man was paranoid, probably buried it somewhere on the property. "We'll come back with ground-penetrating radar, map the whole estate." "What about whoever bought it? They might have found something." "Then we'll convince them to sell, one way or another." The voices faded. Marcus heard a door close. He waited another 30 minutes before risking opening the vault. When he finally climbed the stairs and emerged into the library, the house was empty. But they'd left signs of their search. Drawers pulled open, cushions moved, dust disturbed. Someone knew about the collection. Someone was looking for it, and they'd be back. Marcus left Shadowbrook as the sun set, his mind racing. He couldn't go to the police, not yet. He didn't know who these people were or who they might have in their pocket, and he couldn't risk losing everything before he'd even secured it. He needed help, but it had to be the right help. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Rachel and a man she'd insisted he meet. Thomas Brennan, a lawyer specializing in estate law and asset protection. Thomas was in his 50s, with kind eyes and a reputation for discretion. Rachel had worked with him years ago on a complicated inheritance case. Marcus showed him everything: the photos, the documents, Vincent's letter, the laptop files. Thomas examined each piece carefully, his expression growing more serious. "This is remarkable," Thomas finally said, "and legally airtight. Vincent Holloway knew exactly what he was doing. The trust documentation, the property transfers, it's all legitimate. Mr. Wade, you are the legal owner of this collection." "But?" Marcus asked, hearing the hesitation. "But there are complications. First, the IRS will want to know about this. We're talking about a massive estate, and estate taxes could be substantial. Second, if Vincent had enemies as his letter suggests, they may try to challenge your ownership. And third," Thomas paused, "a collection of this value attracts attention. Not all of it legal." "People were in the house today," Marcus said, "searching for something." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then we need to move quickly. I recommend we do several things immediately. File all necessary documentation with the county, notify the IRS, and work out a tax arrangement, hire professional security for the property, and get insurance. Proper insurance for a collection like this will cost a fortune, but it's necessary." "I don't have a fortune," Marcus said quietly. "I have $800 in the bank. You have $265 million in assets. Banks will loan against that." "But Marcus," Thomas leaned forward. You need to understand what you're stepping into. Collections like this, they change lives. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. There will be people who want to help you and people who want to use you. You'll need to be very careful about who you trust. What happens next will turn Marcus's world upside down, reveal threats he never saw coming, and force him to make choices that will determine not just his future, but his children's safety. What he's found in that vault isn't just treasure, it's a target on his family's back. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Over the next week, Marcus's life became a whirlwind he could barely control. Thomas worked 18-hour days filing documentation, establishing legal structures, and negotiating with insurance companies. They created an LC to hold the assets, filed notices with every relevant agency, and began the process of getting proper appraisals. But word leaked. Marcus never found out how, maybe from the county clerk's office, maybe from the insurance adjusters, maybe from the people who'd searched the house, but somehow the story got out. A widowed father buys condemned estate for $5,000, finds fortune hidden in secret vault. By Wednesday, a reporter from the local newspaper was calling. By Friday, news vans were parked outside Marcus's apartment. He stopped answering his phone. Strangers knocked on his door at all hours. Some wanted interviews, others had business proposals. A few just wanted to congratulate him. But there were other visitors too, ones that made Marcus's skin crawl, men in expensive suits who showed up with offers to manage his assets, collectors who claimed to have information about the provenance of certain pieces, lawyers representing unnamed clients who wanted to purchase specific vehicles. Marcus said no to all of them. He trusted Thomas and no one else. But the pressure was building. Emma came home from school crying because kids were saying her dad was rich now, that he should buy everyone presents. Tyler got in a fight when a classmate called Marcus a thief who'd stolen some dead guy's stuff. The attention was crushing them. The worst came on a Tuesday night. Marcus was putting the kids to bed when he heard glass break. He rushed to the living room to find a brick on the floor, wrapped in paper. The note read, "You don't know what you're dealing with. Sell while you still can." That's when Marcus made the hardest decision of his life. He called Rachel and asked if Emma and Tyler could stay with her for a while, just until things settled down. Rachel agreed immediately, hearing the fear in his voice. "Marcus, maybe you should come too. Leave this whole thing alone." "I can't," he said. "This is their future. Sarah's medical bills, college, a real home. I can't walk away from that." "Even if it gets you killed?" Marcus looked at his kids, both asleep now, innocent and trusting. "I'll be careful, I promise." By the end of that week, Thomas had secured a line of credit against the collection. $2 million, enough to pay for security, insurance, proper appraisals, and give Marcus breathing room. The bank had been thrilled to loan against assets worth $250 million. Marcus paid off every medical bill, every credit card, every debt he'd been drowning under. The feeling of those weights lifting was almost physical. But he didn't touch the rest of the money. He kept living in the apartment, kept driving his beat-up truck, because he knew this was only the beginning. The professional appraisers came next. 3 different firms, all specializing in vintage automobiles and fine art. They spent days in the vault, examining every vehicle, every painting, every piece of jewelry. Their reports confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The collection was even more valuable than Vincent's last appraisal. The final number made Marcus sit down hard. $268 million. And that was conservative. "Some of these pieces are museum quality," one appraiser told him. "The Ferrari alone could set records at auction. And the art collection, Mr. Wade, you have works here that scholars thought were lost. This isn't just valuable, it's historically significant." Marcus hired security. A firm specializing in high-value asset protection installed cameras around Shadowbrook, motion sensors, and put 2 guards on rotating shifts. It cost $12,000 a month, but it meant Marcus could sleep knowing the vault was protected. He also hired someone else, a forensic accountant named Margaret Chen, who specialized in tracking dirty money. He wanted to know who Vincent's enemies had been, who might still be looking for this collection. Margaret was in her 60s, sharp as a razor, and expensive, but Thomas vouched for her. "If anyone can unravel 30-year-old business dealings, it's Margaret," Thomas said. 2 weeks later, Margaret sat in Marcus's apartment with a thick folder and a grim expression. "Vincent Holloway was telling the truth," she began. "He had very powerful enemies. In the 80s, he did business with a consortium of investors, the Western Capital Group. They funded some of his imports and expected percentages on resale. But Vincent kept the best pieces for his personal collection. They felt cheated." "Who were they?" "That's where it gets complicated. The group included 3 prominent businessmen, all still alive. Richard Sullivan owns a chain of hotels across Colorado, James Kincaid, real estate developer, and David Morrison, who sits on the board of 2 major banks. These aren't street criminals, Marcus. These are powerful men with legitimate businesses. And they wanted Vincent's collection." Margaret nodded. "Badly. I found evidence they tried to sue him in '91. The case was settled quietly, terms sealed. But from what I can piece together, Vincent agreed to let them bid on certain pieces when he died. Except he never died. He disappeared, taking the collection with him. So these men have been waiting 30 years for him to be declared legally dead so they could claim the collection." "Exactly. And now you own it, legally, which means they have no claim. But Marcus," Margaret's voice hardened, "men like this don't lose gracefully, especially when they've waited 3 decades. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment, thinking about everything Margaret had told him. 3 powerful businessmen who'd been cheated out of a fortune. 3 men who probably had the resources to make Marcus's life hell. Or end it. His phone rang at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Wade?" The voice was cultured, older. "My name is Richard Sullivan. I believe we need to talk about your recent acquisition." Marcus's blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "I make it my business to stay informed. I understand you've found Vincent Holloway's collection. Congratulations. Quite a windfall." "What do you want?" "To make you an offer, a generous one. I'm prepared to purchase the entire collection for $300 million. $35 million more than the appraisal. All cash, immediate transfer. You walk away wealthy, free of complications." Marcus's mind raced. $300 million. More money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Enough to give Emma and Tyler everything, to never worry again. "Why?" he asked. "Why pay over value?" Sullivan's voice cooled. "Let's just say I have sentimental attachment to certain pieces. Vincent and I were partners once. I'd like to reclaim what's rightfully mine. The collection is legally mine. The courts confirmed it." "Courts can be fickle, Mr. Wade, and you're a man with children, I believe. Children who should be protected." The threat was subtle but clear. Marcus felt rage build in his chest. "Are you threatening my kids?" "I'm offering you an opportunity. $300 million for you to disappear with your family, start fresh somewhere safe. Or you can decline and face years of legal battles, media scrutiny, and who knows what else. The choice is yours. You have 48 hours. The line went dead. Marcus stood in his dark apartment, shaking with anger and fear. They weren't going to stop. These men had waited 30 years. They weren't going to let some broke contractor walk away with their prize. He called Thomas immediately. "They're threatening me, Sullivan. He knows about my kids." "Don't panic. We'll get a restraining order, file harassment charges." "Thomas, these guys have enough money to tie me up in court forever. And they implied they'd hurt Emma and Tyler." Which is why you need to consider the offer seriously. 300 million is life-changing money, Marcus. Maybe it's worth walking away. Marcus thought about Vincent's journal entries, about a man who'd refused to be bullied, who'd protected something beautiful from people who only saw profit, and he thought about Sarah, who'd fought death itself for every extra day with her family. No, he said firmly. Vincent trusted me with this. He chose me. I'm not selling to the people who drove him into hiding. Then we fight, Thomas said. But you need to be ready for war. The next morning, Marcus moved Emma and Tyler to Rachel's house in Denver. He knelt in front of them, trying not to let his fear show. It's just for a little while, he said, until some grown-up stuff gets sorted out. Is it about the house you bought? Emma asked. She was too smart, saw too much. Yeah, baby. Some people aren't happy about it. But it'll be okay, I promise. Tyler wrapped his arms around Marcus's neck. Are we rich now, Dad? Marcus held his son tight, breathing in the smell of his shampoo. We're going to be okay. That's what matters. Driving back to Pierce Junction, Marcus felt the weight of what he'd committed to. He was about to go to war with billionaires over a collection worth $250 million. He was a contractor who'd been broke 2 weeks ago. The odds were laughably bad, but he had something they didn't. He had nothing to lose and everything to fight for, and sometimes that made all the difference. At Shadowbrook Estate, he met with Thomas and Margaret. They'd been working on a strategy. We go public, Margaret said, completely transparent. You announce plans to open a museum, make the collection available to scholars and the public. You become the face of preservation, not profit. Makes it much harder for them to paint you as a thief. And legally, Thomas added, we file preemptive lawsuits, document every threat, every attempt at intimidation. We make them the villains. What about my family? Marcus asked. I've contacted the FBI, Thomas said. Threats against your children, especially from people with Sullivan's resources. That's federal. They're opening an investigation. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. That afternoon he held his first and only press conference, standing in front of Shadowbrook Estate, with cameras recording and reporters shouting questions. Marcus Wade told his story. The struggling father, the desperate gamble, the impossible discovery. But he focused on Vincent, on a man who'd built something beautiful and protected it from exploitation. I'm not selling this collection, Marcus said firmly. I'm going to honor Vincent Holloway's legacy by sharing it with the world. This isn't about money. It's about preservation. It's about making sure future generations can see and appreciate these masterpieces. The reporters loved it. By evening, Marcus's story was everywhere. The widowed father who refused to sell out, the underdog facing billionaires, the guardian of a dead man's dreams. Richard Sullivan called again that night. His voice was cold with rage. You've made a terrible mistake, Mr. Wade. No, Marcus said. You made one 30 years ago when you tried to bully Vincent Holloway. I'm not him, and I'm not afraid of you. He hung up and turned off his phone. Outside Shadowbrook Estate, security lights illuminated the grounds. Cameras watched every approach, and somewhere deep beneath the crumbling mansion, $268 million in treasures waited in the dark. Marcus Wade had gambled everything on a condemned property, and now he was gambling it all again on the belief that doing the right thing was worth any cost. He thought about Vincent's final journal entry, about leaving the collection to someone who needed it. Vincent had been right. Marcus did need it. Not the money. The purpose. The fight. Because for the first time since Sarah died, Marcus felt truly alive. The legal papers arrived on a Monday morning. Marcus was drinking coffee in the Shadowbrook Library, reviewing security footage from the weekend when a courier knocked on the door. The manila envelope was thick, official, stamped with the seal of a law firm Marcus had never heard of, Whitmore, Kincaid and Associates. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 separate lawsuits. Richard Sullivan claimed breach of contract, alleging that Vincent Holloway had promised him first right of refusal on all collection items. James Kincaid's suit claimed fraud, stating that the property auction had been improperly advertised and that he should have been notified of the estate's true value. And David Morrison filed claiming the collection contained items purchased with money Vincent had embezzled from their business partnership, making Morrison a partial owner. Each suit demanded immediate seizure of the collection pending investigation. Each sought damages in excess of $100 million. And all 3 were filed in different jurisdictions, forcing Marcus to defend himself on multiple fronts simultaneously. Thomas called within the hour. "They're coordinating this, trying to bury you in legal costs and complexity." "Can they win?" Marcus asked. "Honestly, probably not. The claims are weak, contradictory even. But that's not the point. They can drag this out for years. Cost you millions in legal fees, make your life hell until you settle." Marcus walked to the window overlooking the valley. Spring had arrived, painting the hills green and gold. From here, the world looked peaceful, but he knew better. "How much will this cost to fight?" Thomas hesitated. "Conservatively, 2 million, maybe more, and that's if it doesn't go to trial." Marcus had the line of credit, but spending $2 million on lawyers meant $2 million less for Emma and Tyler's future. The weight of it pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. "What are my options?" "Fight or settle. Fighting means years of uncertainty. Settling means giving them what they want, probably for far less than the collection's worth." "And if I do nothing?" "They'll get a court order freezing the assets. You won't be able to sell, display, or even access the collection until everything's resolved. Could take 5 years, maybe 10. That night, Marcus drove to Denver to see his kids. Emma and Tyler were staying in Rachel's guest room, their few belongings scattered around the space. Tyler ran to hug him, but Emma hung back, her expression guarded. "Can we come home yet?" Tyler asked. Marcus knelt down. "Not yet, buddy. Soon, though." "Why not?" Emma's voice was sharp, defensive. "Everyone at school says you're in trouble, that you stole stuff from dead people." The words hit Marcus like a punch. "I didn't steal anything, baby. I bought property legally. I found something valuable on that property, and now some people are angry about it." "So give it back," Emma said. "I don't care about being rich. I just want things to be normal." Marcus reached for her, but she pulled away. He saw Sarah in her eyes, that same fierce independence, that same refusal to be comforted with easy lies. "It's not that simple." "It is," Emma insisted. "You're making it complicated. Mom wouldn't have wanted this." The mention of Sarah broke something in Marcus. "Your mom spent 3 years fighting cancer so she could stay with us. She never gave up, even when everyone said she should. This collection, it's our chance at the life she wanted for you. College, security, opportunities. I can't just walk away from that." "Even if it gets us killed?" Emma's voice cracked. "Aunt Rachel showed me the news. Those men you're fighting, they're dangerous." Marcus looked at his sister, who shrugged apologetically. "She asked. I couldn't lie to her." He turned back to Emma. "Nobody's going to hurt you, I promise." "You can't promise that," she said quietly. "Mom promised she'd beat cancer. Grown-ups can't control everything." Marcus drove back to Pierce Junction in silence, Emma's words echoing in his head. She was right. He couldn't control this, couldn't guarantee their safety, couldn't even promise the legal battles would end in his favor. But he could fight, and maybe that had to be enough. Margaret Chen called 2 days later with news. "I found something. In the old partnership documents between Vincent and the Western Capital Group, there's a clause that explicitly states any personal acquisitions made by Vincent outside of their joint ventures belonged solely to him. He was meticulous about keeping his collection separate from business dealings." "That helps us?" "It destroys Sullivan's breach of contract claim, and probably undermines Kincaid's fraud allegation too. Vincent had every legal right to keep the collection private. They knew that. They're just hoping you don't have the resources to prove it. Marcus felt a small spark of hope. What about Morrison's embezzlement claim? Margaret's voice tightened. That's trickier. He's alleging Vincent diverted funds from their import business to purchase collection items. If he can prove it, he might have a legitimate claim to partial ownership. Can he prove it? Not if Vincent was as careful as I think he was. But we'll need to audit every purchase, trace every dollar. It'll take months. We don't have months. The court froze the assets yesterday. Then we need to find something bigger, something that proves they're acting in bad faith. Marcus, these men didn't just want Vincent's collection. I think they wanted him gone. If we can prove they threatened him, harassed him, maybe even drove him into hiding, we can turn this whole thing around. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus became someone he didn't recognize. He spent 14-hour days buried in Vincent's files, reading old letters and business correspondence, looking for evidence of threats or intimidation. Thomas filed motion after motion, fighting the asset freeze, demanding discovery, pushing back against every legal maneuver Sullivan's team deployed. But the pressure was building in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. The story had gone national. Reporters camped outside Shadowbrook, filming segments about the mystery collection. Some portrayed Marcus as a lucky everyman fighting corporate greed. Others suggested he was a con artist trying to steal a fortune. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. And the town of Pierce Junction was divided. Some locals supported Marcus. He was one of them, a working-class guy trying to make good. The owner of the diner started a Support Marcus Wade campaign, collecting donations for his legal fund. The high school shop teacher wrote a letter to the newspaper defending him. But others resented the attention, the media circus, the way their quiet town had become a spectacle. Property values near Shadowbrook skyrocketed as investors anticipated a museum. Longtime residents complained about traffic, about strangers wandering their streets. And some, influenced by Sullivan's public relations campaign, believed Marcus had no right to wealth he hadn't earned. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus was at Shadowbrook reviewing security footage when Thomas called, his voice tight with anger. "They're going after your kids!" Marcus's blood went cold. "What?" "Sullivan's lawyers just filed a motion claiming you're an unfit parent. They're saying the stress and danger of this situation makes you incapable of caring for Emma and Tyler. They've petitioned the court for a welfare investigation." "They can't do that." "They can, and they did. Marcus, this is a pressure tactic. They want you scared, desperate, willing to settle. But we need to take it seriously. Child Services will interview you, interview Rachel, possibly interview the kids." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and consuming. "They're using my children as leverage." "Yes, and it's going to work unless you give me permission to fight dirty too." "Meaning?" "Meaning I stop being polite. I make this public. I go to every news outlet and tell them billionaires are harassing a widowed father, threatening his kids because he won't sell them stolen property. I turn you into a martyr and them into villains." Marcus thought about Emma, already traumatized by losing her mother, now facing questions from social workers about her father's fitness. Thought about Tyler, too young to understand why his world kept falling apart. Thought about Sarah, who'd made him promise to protect their babies no matter what. "Do it," he said, "whatever it takes." Thomas's press conference went viral. Standing on the courthouse steps, he laid out everything. The coordinated lawsuits, the intimidation tactics, the threats against Marcus's children. He displayed copies of the partnership documents proving Vincent's collection was legally separate. He showed the threatening notes Marcus had received, and he challenged Sullivan, Kincaid, and Morrison to explain why 3 billionaires were trying to destroy a working-class father who'd simply been lucky enough to buy the right property. "This isn't about contracts or business disputes," Thomas said, his voice ringing with conviction. This is about powerful men who've spent 30 years believing they were entitled to another man's legacy. And when someone they considered beneath them claimed that legacy legally, they decided to crush him. Shame on them. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Social media exploded with support for Marcus. Hashtags like Team Wade and Protect the Kids trended for days. Celebrities weighed in. Legal analysts dissected the case on cable news. And most importantly, public opinion turned decisively against Sullivan and his partners. But they didn't back down. Instead, they escalated. On a Saturday night, Marcus was alone at Shadowbrook when the power cut out. All of it simultaneously. Lights, security cameras, climate control in the vault. He grabbed his flashlight and pistol, moving carefully through the dark mansion. Outside, he could hear sounds. Footsteps on gravel, voices whispering. He called 911. "Someone's breaking into my property, Shadowbrook Estate on Hilltop Road." "Sir, we show a power outage in your area. Are you sure it's not just—" "I'm sure. Send someone now." He crouched behind a bookshelf in the library, watching shadows move past windows. There were at least 4 of them, maybe more. They weren't even trying to be quiet. The message was clear. "We can get to you whenever we want." The sheriff's department arrived 12 minutes later, sirens blaring. By then, whoever had been outside was gone. The deputies found cut power lines and boot prints in the mud, but no suspects. They filed a report and advised Marcus to stay somewhere else for the night. He didn't. He sat in the dark library with his pistol in his lap, waiting for dawn. And when the sun finally rose, he made a decision. He was done being defensive. It was time to attack. Margaret had been working around the clock, following paper trails through decades-old financial records. She called Marcus at 7 in the morning with triumph in her voice. "I found it. Marcus, I found the smoking gun." "What?" In 1992, Vincent filed a police report. He claimed someone broke into Shadowbrook and vandalized his collection. Several pieces were damaged. He suspected Sullivan and his partners, but couldn't prove it. The police investigated, but closed the case without charges. How does that help us? Because I found repair records. Vincent had to restore 3 vehicles that were damaged in that break-in. And I found something else. A private investigator's report Vincent commissioned. He hired someone to follow Sullivan's people. The investigator documented multiple instances of harassment, vandalism, and threats. Vincent was building a case against them. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Where's the report?" That's the beautiful part. It was filed with his attorney in 1993, right before Vincent disappeared, and that attorney is still alive. She's retired now, living in Santa Fe, but she confirmed she still has Vincent's files in storage, including recordings. Recordings? Vincent wore a wire during some of his meetings with Sullivan's group. He recorded them threatening him, telling him they'd destroy his collection if he didn't sell. "Marcus, we have them on tape admitting to crimes, extortion, conspiracy, possibly more." Thomas filed emergency motions the next day, demanding all civil cases be stayed pending criminal investigation. He submitted Margaret's findings to the FBI, along with the recordings they'd obtained from Vincent's attorney. And he held another press conference, this one even more devastating. Vincent Holloway didn't disappear because he wanted to, Thomas announced. He fled for his life, and the men who drove him into hiding are now trying to steal from the man he chose to inherit his legacy. We have recordings of Richard Sullivan threatening to destroy Vincent's collection. We have evidence of James Kincaid ordering vandalism, and we have proof that David Morrison knew about all of it and participated in covering it up. He played excerpts of the recordings. Sullivan's voice, younger but unmistakable. "You think you can refuse us? We'll burn everything you've built, the collection, your reputation, all of it." Kincaid. "Accidents happen, Vincent. Be a shame if something happened to those fancy cars of yours." Morrison. "You're a smart man, smart enough to know when you've lost. Sell us what we want or we'll take it anyway." The recordings were devastating. Within hours, federal prosecutors announced they were opening a criminal investigation into conspiracy and extortion. Sullivan's hotel chain saw mass cancellations. Kincaid's construction projects faced protests. Morrison quietly resigned from his board positions, but they still didn't drop the lawsuits. "They're desperate now," Thomas explained. "If they lose in criminal court, they lose everything. Their only play is to settle the civil cases fast before the criminal charges stick. They'll offer you money to go away quietly." "How much?" "I'm guessing 200 million, maybe 250, enough that you'd be set for life." Marcus stood at the window of Shadowbrook's library, looking out over the valley. The estate was finally getting the repairs it needed. Contractors were fixing the roof, replacing broken windows, stabilizing the foundation. In 6 months, maybe less, it could be beautiful again. A museum like he'd promised. A place where people could see what Vincent had protected. "What do you think I should do?" he asked Thomas. "Honestly, take the money. You've won the moral victory. The world knows they're criminals. Let them write you a check and move on with your life." Marcus thought about Emma and Tyler, still living with Rachel, still unable to come home. Thought about the stress, the fear, the way this battle had consumed him. $200 million could buy them safety, security, a future free from worry. But it would also mean Sullivan and his partners walked away. They'd pay a fine, maybe serve some probation, but they'd still be powerful, still be rich, still be the kind of people who thought they could take whatever they wanted. "No," Marcus said quietly. "Marcus, Vincent spent 30 years protecting this collection from them. He lost everything, gave up his entire life to keep it safe. If I sell to them now, even for a fortune, it means he lost. It means they win. I can't do that to him." "He's dead," Thomas said gently. "He doesn't care anymore." "But I do, and my kids are watching. What kind of lesson is it if I teach them that bullies win if they're rich enough, that you should give up when things get hard?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Then we see this through to the end. All the way." That night, Marcus drove to Denver unannounced. He found Emma and Tyler doing homework at Rachel's kitchen table. When they looked up and saw him, Tyler jumped up with a grin. "Dad, are we coming home?" Emma's expression was more guarded, but Marcus saw hope in her eyes. He sat down with them. "Not yet, but soon. I wanted to tell you something. Some people are trying to take away something that belongs to us, something valuable, and they're trying to scare me into giving it to them." "Are you going to?" Emma asked. "No, because your mum taught me something important. She taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when you're scared, even when it's hard. She fought for 3 years to stay with us. She never gave up, not once." Tyler's eyes were wide. "So you're going to fight?" "Yeah, buddy, I am. And it might take a while, and it might be scary sometimes, but I need you both to know why I'm doing this. Not for money, for what's right." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she stood and wrapped her arms around him. "Okay, Dad. We trust you." Marcus held his children close and felt something shift inside him. He'd been fighting for them, but maybe they needed to see him fight for principle too. Maybe that was the real inheritance he could give them. Back in Pierce Junction, something unexpected was happening. The town that had been divided was slowly coming together. It started with the diner owner, a woman named Beth who'd served Marcus coffee every morning for years. She organized a community meeting at the high school gym. "This isn't about some rich guy's car collection," Beth told the crowd of nearly 200 people. "This is about one of us standing up to people who think they can push us around. Marcus Wade is a good man. He's one of our own, and we don't let our own fight alone." A retired mechanic named Frank stood up. "I served with Marcus's father in Vietnam. That family has always been good people. Whatever Marcus needs, I'm in." Jenny from Marcus's old construction crew. He gave me work when nobody else would hire a single mom. Never asked for anything but honest labor. Count me in. Even people who'd been critical started to shift. The newspaper editor who'd written skeptical pieces admitted, "I thought this was about greed. But watching how he's handled this, the death threats, the pressure, he's not backing down. That takes guts." By the end of the meeting, they'd raised $37,000 for Marcus's legal defense fund. More importantly, they'd formed a coalition, Friends of Shadowbrook. Their mission was simple: support Marcus Wade and ensure the collection stayed in Pierce Junction as a museum for everyone to enjoy. Marcus heard about the meeting from Thomas. When he showed up at the diner the next morning, the place erupted in applause. People he barely knew shook his hand, hugged him, promised their support. Beth poured his coffee and refused payment. "You're fighting the good fight," she said. "Least we can do is keep you caffeinated." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. He'd been so focused on the legal battles, the threats, the fear, that he'd forgotten something essential: community. He wasn't alone. He'd never been alone. That afternoon, the Friends of Shadowbrook held a rally outside the courthouse. Over 300 people showed up carrying signs: "Protect our museum," "Wade won't fold," "Billionaires can't buy justice." Local news covered it extensively. The story wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about a small town standing up to corporate intimidation. And finally, something broke. James Kincaid called Thomas directly. "We want to settle. All three of you. Sullivan's still being stubborn. Morrison's willing. I'm done with this circus. Here's my offer. I drop all claims. I publicly apologize. And I donate $5 million to establish the Shadowbrook Museum as a non-profit institution." Thomas nearly dropped the phone. "Why?" "Because I'm 73 years old and I don't want to die known as the billionaire who bullied a widower. Vincent was right. We were wrong. We were greedy. And I'm tired of being the villain." Morrison settled 2 days later on similar terms. Another $5 million for the museum. All claims dropped. A public apology. That left only Sullivan, stubborn and proud, still fighting. But he was fighting alone now. His business partners had abandoned him. His lawyers were jumping ship, and the criminal investigation was gathering steam. The FBI had expanded their probe to include tax fraud and money laundering. Sullivan was facing real prison time. 1 week later, his attorneys requested a meeting. Marcus, Thomas, and Margaret sat across from 3 very expensive lawyers in a conference room. "Mr. Sullivan wishes to resolve this matter," the lead attorney said stiffly. "We're listening," Thomas replied. "He will drop all civil claims. He will not apologize. That's non-negotiable. But he will contribute $10 million to the Shadowbrook Museum endowment on the condition that his name appears nowhere on the property or any related materials." "He wants to buy his way out of being remembered as a criminal," Margaret said. The attorney's jaw tightened. "He wants to move on." Marcus thought about Vincent's letter, about a man who'd spent decades protecting beauty from greed, about the responsibility he'd accepted when he opened that vault. $20 million, Marcus said. "Excuse me. If Sullivan wants this to go away, it costs $20 million. 10 for the museum endowment, 10 for a scholarship fund for kids in Pierce Junction. And he releases a statement saying he was wrong to challenge my ownership." The attorneys conferred quietly. Finally, "We'll present the offer." 2 days later, they accepted. Marcus Wade stood in the Shadowbrook Library, the hidden door to the vault open behind him, and read the settlement agreement one final time. All lawsuits dropped. $30 million in donations secured for the museum and scholarship fund. The collection confirmed as his sole property. And most importantly, his children safe. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the desperate $5,000 gamble, the impossible discovery, the threats, the fear, the moments he'd wanted to give up. And he thought about all the people who'd stood with him, Thomas, Margaret, Rachel, Emma, and Tyler, the entire town of Pierce Junction. "We did it," he whispered to the empty room. "Vincent, we actually did it." His phone rang. It was Emma. "Dad, Aunt Rachel showed me the news. Is it over?" "Yeah, baby, it's over. We won." "Can we come home?" Marcus looked around Shadowbrook, at the repairs already underway, at the future taking shape. "Yeah, come home." That weekend, Marcus Wade walked through Shadowbrook Estate with his children for the first time since the battle began. Contractors had transformed the place. The roof was solid, windows repaired, floors restored. It was still months from being a true museum, but you could see the potential now. They descended into the vault together. Tyler gasped when the cars came into view. Emma stood silently, taking it all in. "This is what you were fighting for?" she asked. "No," Marcus said. "I was fighting for you, for your future. This," he gestured at the collection, "this is just metal and paint and history. You two are everything." Emma smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Mom would be proud of you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, I think she would." They spent hours in the vault that day, Marcus telling them about each car, each piece of art, the story of Vincent Holloway and his dream, and slowly Emma and Tyler began to understand. This wasn't about being rich, it was about being guardians of something bigger than themselves. As the sun set, they climbed back upstairs and stood on the newly repaired terrace, looking out over the valley. In the distance, lights from Pierce Junction twinkled in the gathering dark. "So what happens now?" Tyler asked. Marcus put his arms around his children. "Now we build something beautiful. A museum, a learning center, a place that honors what Vincent protected, and we do it together. As a family," Emma added. "As a family," Marcus agreed, because in the end, that's what this had always been about. Not the money or the cars or even the victory over powerful enemies. It was about a father protecting his children's future, about standing up when it would have been easier to fall down, about choosing principle over profit, community over isolation, courage over fear. Marcus Wade had gambled $5,000 on a condemned estate. He'd found a fortune. But more than that, he'd found purpose. And in fighting for Vincent's legacy, he'd built one of his own. One that would last long after the cars were gone, long after the museum closed, long after the story faded from memory. Because he'd taught his children the most valuable lesson of all, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. And that, more than any collection worth hundreds of millions, was the real treasure hidden in Shadowbrook Estate. The settlement papers were signed on a Thursday morning in late May. Marcus sat in Thomas's office, his hand cramping from signing his name what felt like 100 times. Each signature was another door closing on the nightmare of the past 4 months. Each page turned was another step toward the future he'd been fighting for. When the last document was notarized, Thomas leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You did it, Marcus. You actually did it." Marcus stared at the stack of papers. $30 million in secured funding for the museum and scholarship program. Full legal ownership of the collection confirmed. All threats neutralized. His children safe. It didn't feel real. "What happens now?" he asked. Thomas slid another folder across the desk. "Now you build something. I've drafted articles of incorporation for the Shadowbrook Heritage Foundation. You'll be chairman of the board. We'll need to assemble a team, museum director, curator, education coordinator, security chief. You're not just a lucky guy who found treasure anymore, Marcus. You're running a major cultural institution." The weight of that hit Marcus hard. He'd been so focused on surviving the legal battle that he hadn't truly processed what came next. He was responsible for a collection worth over $268 million, responsible for honoring Vincent's legacy, responsible for creating something that would serve his community for generations. "I don't know how to run a museum," he said quietly. "No," Thomas agreed. But you know how to work hard, how to learn, and how to surround yourself with good people. The rest you'll figure out." That afternoon, Marcus drove to Shadowbrook Estate. The transformation over the past few weeks was remarkable. With money from the settlement and the line of credit, he'd hired the best contractors in the state. The roof was completely rebuilt with copper that would last a century. Every window had been replaced with historically accurate but modern glass. The foundation had been reinforced with steel and concrete. The exterior stone had been cleaned and repointed, revealing the honey-colored beauty that had been hidden under decades of grime. Inside was even more dramatic. The grand staircase had been restored to its original glory, the marble polished until it gleamed. The dining room's coffered ceiling had been repaired and painted. The library, where Marcus had first found the hidden door, now had floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books about automotive history, art conservation, and collector culture. And throughout the house, subtle modern touches, climate control, security systems, fire suppression, all hidden behind period-appropriate facades. But the real work was happening underground. The vault that had once been Vincent's secret was being expanded into a proper museum space. Engineers had excavated additional rooms, installing proper lighting, humidity control, and security measures that would make Fort Knox jealous. Display cases were being custom-built for the art collection. Ramps and walkways were being constructed so visitors could safely view the vehicles from multiple angles. Marcus walked through the construction, hard hat on his head, greeting workers by name. Many of them were locals from Pierce Junction. He'd made it a priority to hire from the community whenever possible. The electrician was Frank, the Vietnam vet who'd stood up for him at the town meeting. The lead carpenter was Jenny from his old construction crew. Even Beth's husband was working on the landscaping, restoring the formal gardens to their original 19th century design. "Looking good, boss," Frank called out, wiping sweat from his forehead. They were installing track lighting in what would become the main gallery. "Thanks to you guys," Marcus replied. "How's the timeline?" "If everything goes smooth, we'll be done by September, October at the latest." Marcus did the math in his head. That would give them time for a grand opening before the holidays. 6 months from desperate contractor to museum director. His head spun thinking about it. That evening, he picked up Emma and Tyler from Rachel's house. They'd been staying in Denver during the worst of the legal battle, but now it was time to bring them home. Their belongings were already packed, everything they owned fitting into 6 boxes and 3 suitcases. "You ready?" Marcus asked. Emma nodded, but he could see nervousness in her eyes. "Are we moving into the mansion?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "That's the museum. But I found us a house. A real house. I want you to see it." He drove them to a neighborhood on the good side of Pierce Junction, where trees-lined streets and yards had swing sets. He pulled into the driveway of a modest craftsman-style home. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a backyard with room for a garden. Nothing extravagant, but clean and safe and theirs. "This is ours?" Tyler asked, his voice small with wonder. "Yeah, buddy. Bought it last week. Want to see your room?" They spent the next hour exploring. Emma's room had built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the backyard. Tyler's had space for all his toys and a closet big enough to feel like a fort. The kitchen was bright and modern. The living room had a fireplace that actually worked. Marcus found Emma standing in her empty room looking out the window. "You okay, baby?" She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "I don't remember the last time I had my own room. When Mom got sick, I moved in with Tyler so she could have the bedroom. Then, after she died, we couldn't afford anything bigger." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "Those days are over, I promise." "Dad?" Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "What you did, fighting those men, was it worth it?" He thought about the question carefully. "Yes, not because of the money or this house, because I proved something to myself, that I could protect you guys, that I could stand up for what's right. Your mom did that every day of her life, especially at the end. I needed to know I could too." Emma hugged him tighter. "She'd be proud of you. She'd be proud of all of us." Over the next 3 months, Marcus threw himself into building the museum. He hired Dr. Patricia Chen, a retired curator from the Denver Art Museum, to serve as director. She brought expertise and connections, helping Marcus navigate the complex world of museum operations. Together they assembled a team: a collection manager, an education coordinator, a marketing director, and a head of security. They also formed the board of directors for the Shadowbrook Heritage Foundation. Thomas served as legal counsel. Margaret Chen, the forensic accountant, joined to oversee finances. Beth from the diner represented the community, and Marcus convinced Rachel to take a position handling public relations and community outreach. "You want me to quit my job and move here?" Rachel asked when he offered. "The foundation will pay you $60,000 a year, more than you're making now, and Tyler and Emma need you close. I need you close." She'd accepted, moving to Pierce Junction 2 weeks later. But the most important addition to the team came from an unexpected source. One afternoon, a woman in her 70s appeared at Shadowbrook's front door. She had silver hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that held decades of stories. "Are you Marcus Wade?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" She extended her hand. "My name is Helen Carraway. I was Vincent Holloway's personal assistant from 1976 until he disappeared. I heard you were opening his collection to the public. I'd like to help." Marcus invited her inside and spent 3 hours listening to her stories. Helen had been there for every acquisition, every restoration, every moment of Vincent's obsessive dedication to his collection. She knew which cars he'd loved most, which pieces of art had moved him to tears, which watches he'd worn on special occasions. "He would have loved what you're doing," she said, looking around the restored mansion. "Vincent always believed these things should be shared. He just couldn't trust the people who wanted them." "Why did you stay silent all these years?" Marcus asked. Helen's expression darkened. "Because Sullivan and his people threatened me, told me if I ever spoke about Vincent's collection, I'd regret it. I was a widow with no resources to fight back, so I stayed quiet. But now that you've beaten them, now that the collection is safe, I want to tell Vincent's story properly." Marcus hired her on the spot as chief historian and archivist. Helen threw herself into the work, writing detailed descriptions for every item in the collection, organizing Vincent's papers and photographs, and planning educational programs. By August, the museum was taking shape. The main gallery showcased 12 of the finest vehicles in chronological order, from the 1934 Packard to the 1969 Shelby Cobra. Each car had been professionally detailed until it gleamed. Each sat on a custom platform with lighting designed to highlight its unique features. And beside each vehicle, a placard told its story: where Vincent found it, how he restored it, what made it significant. The art gallery occupied 3 rooms on the mansion's 2nd floor. The Picasso sketch had place of pride, along with works by Chagall, Miro, and Warhol that Marcus hadn't even known were in the collection. Dr. Chen had arranged them thoughtfully, creating dialogues between pieces, showing how artistic movements evolved through the 20th century. A special room was dedicated to Vincent himself. Helen had curated a biographical exhibit: childhood photos, business documents, personal letters, and the final journal entries that explained why he'd disappeared. Visitors would understand that Shadowbrook wasn't just about expensive objects. It was about one man's passion and the lengths he'd gone to protect what he loved. But Marcus's proudest achievement was the Education Center. An addition built onto the mansion's east wing housed classrooms, a workshop, and a library. Local students could visit for free, learning about automotive history, engineering, art conservation, and more. The foundation had already partnered with Pierce Junction High School to offer internships and mentorship programs. "You're not just preserving the past," Dr. Chen told Marcus during a walkthrough. "You're investing in the future. That's what makes this special. The scholarship fund, administered separately from the museum, had already awarded its first grants. 20 students from Pierce Junction and surrounding communities received funding for college. The criteria were simple: demonstrate financial need and a commitment to learning. Marcus personally reviewed every application, looking for kids like he'd been. Kids who had potential but not privilege. Kids who needed someone to believe in them. One recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Maya, whose mother had died of cancer the previous year. Reading her essay about wanting to become an oncologist so other kids wouldn't lose their mums, Marcus had to step away from his desk and cry. He wrote her a personal note with the acceptance letter. "Your mom would be proud. Keep fighting. Marcus Wade." As September approached, preparations for the grand opening intensified. Invitations went out to collectors, historians, journalists, and community members. The response was overwhelming. Over 500 people confirmed attendance. National magazines requested interviews. The Smithsonian's automotive curator asked for a private tour. Even the governor's office called, asking if she could speak at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. But Marcus insisted on keeping the event grounded. "This is for Pierce Junction," he told the planning committee. "Fancy people can come, but the town comes first." So they planned 2 events, a formal gala on Friday night for donors and dignitaries, and a community open house on Saturday for everyone else. Both would be free. Both would celebrate not just the collection, but the people who'd made it possible. The week before opening, Marcus took Emma and Tyler to Shadowbrook for a private tour. It was the first time they'd seen the finished museum. He led them through the front entrance, newly restored to its original grandeur. The chandelier sparkled overhead. Period furniture, carefully selected by Dr. Chen, made the mansion feel alive again. "Wow!" Tyler breathed, his eyes huge. They descended to the main gallery. The cars sat in perfect rows, lit like jewels. Emma walked slowly between them, reading every placard, studying every detail. She stopped at the 1963 Corvette Stingray, her reflection captured in its perfect paint. "Dad, this is incredible." Marcus stood beside her. "Vincent spent his whole life building this. Now it belongs to everyone. People will come from all over to see these cars, to learn their stories, and every penny of profit goes back into education and preservation." "So you're not keeping the money?" Tyler asked. "The foundation pays me a salary, enough for us to live comfortably. Everything else goes to the mission. That's what Vincent would have wanted." Emma turned to him. "Mom would have loved this. She always said you were good at fixing broken things." "I learned from the best," Marcus said quietly. "She fixed me when I was broken." They spent 2 hours exploring every corner of the museum. Tyler's favorite was the automotive workshop, where restoration demonstrations would be held. Emma loved the art gallery, especially the modern pieces, and both kids were impressed by the education center with its computers, library, and hands-on exhibits. As they left, Tyler grabbed Marcus's hand. "Are you happy now, Dad?" Marcus thought about the question. 4 months ago, he'd been drowning in debt, selling his tools to gamble on a condemned property. He'd been exhausted, afraid, barely holding his family together. Now he had a home, a purpose, and his children safe beside him. "Yeah, buddy, I'm happy." The gala on Friday night was elegant but not ostentatious. Guests arrived in formal wear and were greeted with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played in the main hall. Dr. Chen led tours through the galleries, sharing expertise about each piece. Collectors and museum directors from across the country mingled with local business owners and town officials. Marcus wore a suit for only the 3rd time in his life. He felt awkward in it, kept tugging at the collar. But Rachel told him he looked good, and Emma said he cleaned up nice, so he tried to relax. The governor spoke, praising Marcus for his vision and dedication. Thomas gave a brief history of the legal battle, carefully omitting the most painful details but making clear what Marcus had overcome. And then Marcus was called to the podium. He looked out at the crowd and felt his throat tighten. Public speaking terrified him. But he thought about Vincent, about Sarah, about everything that had led to this moment. "I'm not good at speeches," he began. "I'm a contractor. I work with my hands. But I want to say something about why we're here. 4 months ago, I bought this property because I was desperate. I had $800 in the bank, 2 kids to feed, and medical debt crushing me. I gambled everything on a piece of land nobody else wanted. And I found something impossible. A fortune hidden by a man I never met. Vincent Holloway could have taken this collection with him, could have sold it or destroyed it. Instead, he protected it. He hid it away and waited for someone to find it. Someone who would appreciate not just what it was worth, but what it meant. I think Vincent understood something important. Possessions don't matter. Not really. What matters is what we do with them. These cars, this art, these beautiful things, they only have value if they're shared, if they teach us something, if they inspire us to create and preserve and care. So tonight isn't about me. It's about Vincent's legacy. It's about this community that supported me when powerful people tried to destroy me. And it's about everyone who'll walk through these doors in the years to come and feel what I felt the first time I saw that gullwing Mercedes. Wonder. Joy. Connection to something bigger than ourselves. That's what Shadowbrook Heritage Museum represents. Thank you for being part of it. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stepped down from the podium, his hands shaking, and found Rachel waiting with tears in her eyes. "Sarah would have burst with pride," she whispered. The community open house on Saturday was everything Marcus had hoped for. Over 800 people showed up, many from Pierce Junction, but others from throughout Colorado. Families brought children who pressed their faces against display cases. Teenagers took selfies with the Ferrari. Elderly couples held hands and reminisced about cars they'd owned decades ago. Beth set up a booth selling museum merchandise, all designed by local artists. T-shirts, postcards, coffee mugs, every purchase supporting the foundation. The line stretched around the building. Frank gave informal talks about automotive history, drawing crowds with his stories. Jenny led kids through the workshop, letting them hold tools and ask questions. And Helen, Vincent's former assistant, sat in the biographical exhibit answering questions. People wanted to know about the mysterious collector who'd built this treasure. She told them stories, showed them photographs, made Vincent real. Marcus walked through the crowds with Emma and Tyler, soaking it all in. He saw joy on people's faces, wonder in their eyes. Parents explaining to children why these old cars mattered. Students taking notes for school projects, collectors examining details with magnifying glasses. This was what he'd fought for. Not the money or the victory over Sullivan. This: community, education, preservation, legacy. Late in the afternoon, as the crowds began to thin, Marcus found himself alone in the main gallery. He stood in front of the 1957 Mercedes Gullwing, the car that had first taken his breath away. Its doors were open in the distinctive upward sweep that gave it its name, like wings reaching for the sky. "We did it," he whispered to the car, to Vincent, to Sarah, to everyone who'd believed in him. "We actually did it." Footsteps echoed behind him. He turned to find an elderly man in a cardigan, walking with a cane. The man approached slowly, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Son," he said, his voice shaking, "I need to tell you something. My name is Walter Morrison. David Morrison was my brother." Marcus tensed. Morrison had been one of the 3 billionaires who'd tried to take the collection, one of Vincent's enemies. "I know what David did," Walter continued. "I know he tried to hurt you, but I want you to know something. In 1982, I owned a '63 Corvette Stingray. Exact same model as that one right there." He pointed with his cane. "I loved that car, restored it myself over 5 years. Then I got sick, cancer, and had to sell it to pay medical bills. broke my heart. I've thought about that car every day for 40 years. His voice cracked. Seeing one here, preserved like this, available for everyone to enjoy, it healed something in me I didn't know was still broken. What you've done here, it's not about money or collections. It's about keeping beauty alive. Thank you. He extended a shaking hand. Marcus took it, gripping firmly. I'm sorry about your brother, Marcus said. I know this whole thing was complicated. Walter shook his head. David was wrong. He let greed poison him. I tried to talk him out of going after you, but he wouldn't listen. He died angry, clutching grudges until the end. I don't want that to be my story. So I came here to say thank you, and to tell you that not everyone in my family is proud of what happened. Some of us think you're doing something noble. After Walter left, Marcus sat on a bench in the gallery and let the moment wash over him. This was bigger than he'd imagined. The museum wasn't just about expensive cars or impressive art. It was about connection, about how objects could carry meaning, trigger memories, heal old wounds. As autumn settled over Pierce Junction, Shadowbrook Heritage Museum became a permanent fixture in the community. Attendance exceeded all projections. They welcomed 3,000 visitors in the first month alone. Tour groups came from Denver, Colorado Springs, even out of state. Car clubs made pilgrimages. Schools scheduled field trips. But more importantly, the museum became a gathering place. On Tuesday evenings, they hosted classic car meetups where local enthusiasts could show their own vehicles and talk shop. Thursday afternoons were reserved for senior citizens who got free admission and guided tours. Saturday mornings, the Education Center offered workshops for kids interested in mechanics, engineering, or art. The scholarship fund grew too. With revenue from museum admissions, gift shop sales, and additional donations, they were able to expand the program. By December, they'd awarded 40 scholarships totaling over $600,000. Marcus personally called each recipient, offering encouragement and support. One call stood out. A young man named David, no relation to Morrison, was studying mechanical engineering at Colorado State. Mr. Wade, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My dad died when I was 12. Left us with nothing. My mom works 3 jobs. Without this scholarship, I'd have dropped out. You changed my life. You changed your own life, Marcus replied. I just helped remove some obstacles. Make us proud, David. But running the museum wasn't without challenges. Marcus was learning on the fly, making mistakes and correcting them. He hired too many staff initially and had to make difficult cuts. He approved an expensive exhibit that flopped. He struggled with the balance between preservation and access, wanting people to enjoy the collection while protecting it for future generations. Dr. Chen was patient, mentoring him through the learning curve. You'll get there, she assured him after a particularly difficult board meeting. Management is like restoration. You strip away what doesn't work and rebuild until it's right. At home, life found a new rhythm. Emma thrived at her new school, making friends and joining the debate team. Tyler discovered a passion for drawing, spending hours sketching cars from the museum. Marcus cooked dinner most nights, attempting recipes Sarah used to make, and usually failing in entertaining ways. Dad, this chicken is like rubber, Emma said one night, poking at her plate. Noted, pizza tomorrow? They laughed together, and Marcus felt Sarah's presence in the room. She would have loved this. The stability, the joy, the simple blessing of a family table with food on it and no creditors calling. On Thanksgiving, Marcus invited the whole team to his house. Thomas and his wife, Margaret, and her partner, Dr. Chen, Helen, Rachel, and a dozen others crowded around a table that had to be extended with a piece of plywood and covered with mismatched tablecloths. The turkey was dry, the stuffing was lumpy, but nobody cared. To Vincent Holloway, Marcus said, raising his glass, who gave us all a second chance. To Vincent, everyone echoed. And to Marcus, Rachel added, who had the courage to take it. As winter approached, Marcus made time for something he'd neglected: himself. He started running in the mornings, working off stress and rediscovering the joy of physical challenge. He took a woodworking class at the community center, learning to build furniture by hand, and he started therapy, working through the grief he'd carried since Sarah's death. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, helped him understand something important. "You've been running on adrenaline and survival instinct for years," she said. "First Sarah's illness, then her death, then the financial struggle, then the legal battle. Now that things are stable, your body and mind need to process all that delayed grief and trauma. Be patient with yourself." It was hard work, harder than fighting billionaires or restoring a museum, but Marcus committed to it. Emma and Tyler deserved a father who was whole, not just functional. By Christmas, Shadowbrook had become more than a museum. It was a symbol, proof that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things, proof that communities mattered, proof that standing up to bullies was worth the cost. The foundation's impact rippled outward. With revenue exceeding expectations, they expanded into medical debt relief, offering grants to families struggling with healthcare costs. Marcus created the program in Sarah's memory, wanting to spare others the crushing weight he'd carried. The first recipient was a single father whose daughter needed chemotherapy. Marcus met with him personally, handing over a check that covered 90% of the outstanding bills. "I don't understand," the man said, tears streaming. "Why would you do this for strangers?" "Because someone did it for me," Marcus replied. "Vincent Holloway. He didn't know me, but he left me a legacy that changed everything. Now I'm passing it forward." On the first anniversary of buying Shadowbrook Estate, Marcus stood alone in the vault where it all began. The space had been transformed into the main gallery, but he could still remember that first moment. The shock of seeing the gullwing, the weight of Vincent's letter in his hands, the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. He thought about everything that had happened, the legal battles, the threats, the fear, but also the community support, the healing, the purpose he'd found. He'd started this journey with $5,000 and desperation. Now he had a home, healthy kids, a mission, and peace. He pulled Vincent's letter from his pocket. He'd carried it every day, the paper soft from handling. He read the final line again. "May you have better luck with it than I did." "I did," Marcus said to the empty gallery. "Vincent, I really did, and I promise to honor what you built, every single day." Footsteps behind him. He turned to find Emma and Tyler, both holding something behind their backs. "We made you something," Emma said. "For your anniversary." They presented a framed photograph, Marcus in the center, surrounded by the museum team, taken at the grand opening. Everyone was smiling, celebrating. But Emma had added something. Using her design software skills, she'd overlaid two ghostly figures in the background, Sarah and an elderly man Marcus recognized from Helen's photos as Vincent Holloway. "The people who made this possible," Tyler explained, "even though they're not here." Marcus's vision blurred with tears. He pulled his children close, holding them tight. "They're here," he whispered, "in every part of this, in every scholarship, every restored car, every kid who visits and dreams bigger because of what they see. They're here." That night, the three of them sat on the terrace at Shadowbrook, watching the sun set over the valley. The museum was closed, the grounds quiet. In the distance, Pierce Junction's lights began to twinkle as darkness fell. "Dad," Tyler asked, "are you glad you bought this place?" Marcus thought about the question, about the cramped apartment, the medical debt, the fear that had defined his life before, and he thought about where he was now, not just financially secure, but purposeful, not just surviving, but thriving. "Yeah, buddy, best $5,000 I ever spent." "Even with all the scary stuff? The lawsuits and the threats?" "Especially because of that," Because it taught me something important, that running away is easy, standing your ground is hard, but hard things are usually worth doing. Emma leaned against his shoulder. Mom used to say that. She did, and she lived it. 3 years of fighting cancer when she could have given up after 3 months. She taught me how to fight. Vincent gave me something to fight for. And you too, you're why I fought. As spring returned to Colorado, Shadowbrook Heritage Museum announced its expansion plans. With continued strong revenue and additional donations, they would build a dedicated automotive restoration center where students could learn conservation techniques. They would expand the scholarship program to include graduate students. And they would establish a traveling exhibit, taking pieces from the collection to smaller communities that couldn't visit Pierce Junction. We're not just preserving the past, Marcus told the local newspaper. We're building the future. The reporter, a young woman who'd covered the story from the beginning, smiled. You've become something of a folk hero, you know, the working-class guy who beat the billionaires. Marcus shook his head. I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad who got lucky and tried to do right by it. The real heroes are the people who stood with me, the lawyers who believed in the case, the town that refused to let me fight alone, the team that built this museum, them, not me. But privately, Marcus was beginning to understand his own role in the story. He'd been the catalyst, the person willing to risk everything when others would have walked away. That took something. Maybe not heroism, but courage, resilience, faith. On a warm June evening, exactly 18 months after buying Shadowbrook, Marcus hosted a private dinner at the museum. The guest list was small, his closest allies and friends. Thomas and Margaret, Dr. Chen and Helen, Beth and Frank, Rachel, and of course Emma and Tyler. They ate in the formal dining room, restored to its original elegance. Crystal glasses caught candlelight. Laughter echoed off the coffered ceiling. It felt like a family gathering, which in a way it was. These people had become his family, bound not by blood, but by shared struggle and triumph. After dinner, Marcus stood and tapped his glass. I want to say something. 18 months ago I was drowning. Medical debt, poverty, fear. I bought this property out of desperation, not wisdom. I had no idea what I was doing, and I still don't most days. That got laughs. But you saved me, not just with your expertise or support, but with your faith. You believed this mattered. You believed I could do it. And because you believed, I started believing too. So thank you for everything. Thomas raised his glass. To Marcus Wade, who proved that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. To Marcus, everyone echoed. Later, after the guests had left and the kids were asleep upstairs, Marcus walked through the quiet museum alone. He stopped at each display, remembering the journey. The legal battles fought over these cars, the threats endured to protect them, the community that rallied to preserve them, and he thought about legacy, not just Vincent's, but his own. Emma and Tyler would grow up knowing their father had stood for something, had fought for principle over profit, had chosen courage over comfort. That mattered more than any dollar amount. He ended his walk in the biographical exhibit, standing before Vincent's final journal entry. The words he'd read 100 times but never tired of. Someday someone will find it. Someone who needs it more than I do now. Someone who'll appreciate what I built, not just what it's worth. I needed it, Marcus said softly to Vincent's photograph, and I appreciated it. Every single piece. Not for what it could buy, but for what it represented. Beauty, dedication, the belief that some things are worth protecting. You saved my life, Vincent. You saved my children's future, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your sacrifice mattered. Walking back through the mansion, Marcus felt Sarah's presence strongly. He could almost hear her voice, proud and loving. You did good, Marcus. You did real good. We did good, he corrected her memory. You taught me how. He locked up the museum and drove home through quiet streets. His house, small but perfect, waited with lights glowing warm in the windows. Tyler had left his bike on the lawn again. Emma's debate team trophy sat in the front window. The grass needed mowing. The mailbox was crooked. It was beautiful. Marcus Wade, widowed father, former contractor, now museum director and foundation chairman, pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment. He thought about all the versions of himself he'd been. The terrified husband watching his wife die. The broke single parent selling his tools. The desperate gambler bidding on condemned property. The fighter standing up to billionaires. The guardian of a priceless legacy. All of those men had led him here, to this moment, to this peace. He climbed out of his truck and headed inside, where his children slept safe and his future stretched bright and wide. Tomorrow he'd face new challenges. The museum needed constant attention. The foundation had families to help. Emma needed help with her history project. Tyler wanted to learn to ride a bike without training wheels. Ordinary things, beautiful things, the kinds of things that made life worth living. Because in the end, the greatest treasure Marcus Wade found beneath Shadowbrook Estate wasn't the cars or the art or the $268 million collection. It was purpose. It was the knowledge that one person, armed with courage and supported by community, could change the world. Vincent Holloway had understood that, had built a legacy not of wealth but of meaning. And Marcus, in protecting that legacy, had built one of his own. Anyone can rebuild their life if they're willing to take the risk, stand their ground, and believe that broken things, broken places, and broken people all deserve a second chance at becoming beautiful again. As the sun rose over Pierce Junction the next morning, casting golden light across Shadowbrook Heritage Museum, Marcus Wade stood on his front porch with coffee in hand and peace in his heart. He wasn't a hero, wasn't special, wasn't anything but an ordinary man who'd refused to give up when giving up would have been easier. And in refusing, he'd discovered something powerful, that the distance between survival and legacy is measured not in dollars or achievements, but in the courage to believe you deserve better and the strength to fight for it. The mechanic who once fixed engines in a cramped garage now preserved history in a museum visited by thousands. The father who once skipped meals so his kids could eat now funded scholarships for hundreds. The man who once felt invisible now stood as proof that one decision, one gamble, one moment of desperate faith could change everything. Because for Marcus Wade and for everyone who would walk through Shadowbrook's doors in the years to come, the message was clear. Fortune favors not just the bold, but the broken who refuse to stay that way. And sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in vaults beneath condemned estates, but in the hearts of people brave enough to claim them. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering tales of courage, hope, and transformation. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to give up on their dreams.